Nerderotic.com.
Welcome back, everybody. Gary here from Nerderotic.com. And for those of you who are new to the channel, I used to own a comic shop. I owned the Comic Outpost here in San Francisco for 10 years. So occasionally I will do videos about comic book retailing, especially when it's about the retail industry dying, which it has been for quite some time, actually a couple decades now. But what's hastened the fall of the comic book retailing industry is the lack of customer service for Marvel and to a smaller part DC. They haven't been as bad as Marvel, but they are starting to get that way. And when I hear that DC Comics doesn't fit into AT&T's vision for WarnerMedia in the future, I'm not surprised. Consider this a sequel to my video from March 1st where I asked if Marvel Comics would end. And the answer is yes, everything ends. But it's going to end sooner than later. And the streaming wars and SJW Marvel and creatives attacking fans has everything to do with it. Where does DC Comics fit in AT&T's vision for WarnerMedia? Now, this is the source article, Forbes, but we're going to focus on the Bounding into Comics article because it sums everything up pretty nicely, and the Forbes article is long. I will link both in the description. Report DC Comics might not have a future as part of WarnerMedia under AT&T by J.B. Augustine. DC's future in the hands of the new WarnerMedia regime looks like it could be in jeopardy. Rumblings of this have been felt throughout the comic book industry the past several months, and on closer inspection, the dominoes are falling and starting to add up. A new piece in Forbes spells out the circumstances, and there are a few takeaways. For a start, DC got a back seat, a literal small corner, at the San Diego Comic Convention this year. In years past, they have normally been out in the open presenting plans and upcoming offerings. Now, I sold my comic shop back in 2013, and while at the time it was heartbreaking, I am very comfortable with my decision. I think it's one of the better decisions of my life to get out then when things were good. Now, I don't have much bad to say about DC. They have always been the nicest out of the big two to retailers. They've always tried to work with us. But recently, they have pulled some shenanigans that are very Marvel-like, considering the Tom King wedding debacle. And they had planned that all along, and their treatment of retailers over that is unforgivable. And now we get this. And we all saw this coming. Now, the comic book industry has been dying for years now, largely due to complacency. Retailers got very comfortable with the convenience of Diamond being the only game in town, and because they were the only game in town, they didn't have to innovate jack squat. They had the same computer system for 10 years, and they didn't feel the need to change it because they didn't have to. But in the last few years, the creatives have to bear some of the responsibility of the comic industry dying. Their treatment of fans is something that can't be undersold, but it's never talked about with the access media. Bounding into Comics will bring it up, and YouTubers will bring it up, but nobody else will. And that is why DC is now a redundancy, and it looks like it'll just be ended. Just like Marvel Comics. When we had these big companies gobbling up other companies, they are now in debt and they need to trim the fat. And the comic industry is certainly some fat right now because the best work is happening in independent comics and it's not coming from the big two. More telling than that, DC did not partake in the San Diego Comic-Con independently. They were there as part of the greater WarnerMedia tent, one of many cogs in the machine. A prolific content creator, one of the biggest in media, they were once known as DC Entertainment. This is no longer the case. And I was there walking the floor, and I did notice the giant DC pavilion was missing. And yes, it wasn't just a space or a spot. It was a pavilion with giant posters and people signing. And it had been there for years, even when Marvel skipped that decade at San Diego Comic-Con. Yes, Marvel did skip a decade. DC was there, and now they were just part of WarnerMedia, and it was a focus on television shows, and you could barely tell that the comics were involved. I just thought it was because of the AT&T merger and possibly paying J.J. Abrams $500 million to take over the DCEU, but it turns out it was more than that, and now I'm starting to think there's something to this. Disheartening as that is to the publishers, devotees, and creative minds, this out-of-nowhere turn of events isn't without cause. Ever since AT&T acquired WarnerMedia, the telecom giant has not given a great deal of emphasis to DC's IP. When profiling AT&T CEO John Stankey, DC was never mentioned, and they seemed to view the company as just another lifestyle brand among many others they oversee. Stankey did discuss Greg Berlanti, the producer behind the CW's Arrowverse. Now, I want to jump back to the Forbes article real quick so we can talk about lifestyle brands, because that's the easy direction for both Marvel and DC to take right now, because yes, the t-shirts and the pajamas and the sheets and everything else and the keychains sell better than the comics do, because nerd culture is in vogue right now, but it won't be in vogue forever. DC also has an edge that few people talk about in terms of logo design and iconography. Superman's S, the bat signal, Flash's lightning bolt, and other distinctive marks associated with DC characters dwarf almost everything that Marvel has to offer, with the possible exception of Spider-Man's insignia, which they are going away from because they love our hero, Captain Marvel, and even gives main Disney a run for its money. This gives DC a permanent structural advantage in the lucrative fields of licensed merchandise and apparel that the company have never fully exploited. And Warner Brothers has never known what to do with DC. So what makes you think AT&T will know what to do with DC? I have seen superhero t-shirts come and go as popular things in my lifetime twice. I remember in the late 70s, everybody was wearing a Superman shirt, and in the late 80s, everyone was wearing a Batman shirt. But not everyone was wearing it in the mid-90s. These trends go away, so to bank everything on a lifestyle brand is a huge mistake. I do not lose sleep at night worrying about our creative direction around here. Well, a lot of comic book retailers have lost a lot of sleep because they had to close their stores, but I'm glad you're doing okay. Our challenge will be getting the great creative strength and marrying it with great technology and the ability to manage customer life cycles. Customer life cycles. Well, there is no life cycles when it comes to comic book stores, because your creatives have attacked those customers, killing that life cycle. If we can get the three-legged stool working, then we're unstoppable. You have been stopping yourself because of the choice of the creatives, allowing them to get political and partisan within their comic books, even within DC comic books. Tom King has single-handedly killed DC, making a depressed and suicidal Mr. Miracle. But that wedding debacle, they just did it so Catwoman could cuck out Batman, so she could leave him at the altar, putting her in the position of power. More of this intersectional feminism creeping into absolutely everything, putting an expiration date on your customer life cycles. Due in no small part to debt concerns, AT&T views its new operation in terms of assets, and this is why the comic book retailing industry was never going to perform well, because it never was meant to perform in big corporate America. It is now a niche market. And while it could have been bigger than it was never going to be what it was in the 70s and 80s. And it certainly could have survived if they had done stuff like make comics returnable, make comics cheaper by using pulp, like Alterna does. Well done, Alterna. But all the innovation is happening with the smaller publishers and the independents, and the big two are going to be the ones that die first. The company incurred a new $85.4 billion mound of debt in acquiring WarnerMedia, bringing their total debt to $164 billion. I hope that sounds familiar to you, because Marvel and Disney just incurred a giant debt of $71 billion by purchasing Fox, and the same damn thing could happen. In order to find our way out of that debt, we are looking to monetize WarnerMedia as a whole entity, bigger than its constituent parts, to make that money back. Meaning we really need something to work to get a return on our investment. So they went further in debt by getting Jar Jar Abrams to run the DCEU. Gee, I wonder how that's going to work out. Let me guess. We'll have pretty decent or strong openings with all of the films, and they'll all finish like crap. And again, they won't get a cinematic universe. Anytime you try to make one of those, it fails. Consequently, certain endeavors were given priority over others. While executives were putting all of their eggs in the HBO Max basket, DC Vertigo line, Mad Magazine, and streaming service Filmstruck were all shuttered. Low revenue appears to be the reason. And we need to talk about the once great Vertigo line, which I read most of those comics and I loved most of those comics. And I recently bumped into literally Zoe Quinn at the San Diego Comic Convention, and I do regret not asking her how it feels to have killed Vertigo. DC Universe is constantly thought to be on the bubble, but is surviving for now. And I did report on that. Card will be right here, and I'm sticking by it. I think they will either bundle the DC Universe, that way it will survive, or they will just roll it into HBO Max. We'll find out, and I think a lot depends on the success of Titans. And if it's anything like season 1, it won't be that much of a success. The worst sign it won't be around long or suffers for lack of faith by the brass is the cancellation of Swamp Thing. And I have talked about it here on this channel, and John F. Trent and I have talked about it when we covered the Swamp Thing episodes. We still have to do one more of those, by the way, so please check in on us for that. A sudden decision from on high, still shrouded in mystery. It looks like a cost-cutting measure mostly, given all the above information. It did cost about $10 million an episode, and it was an expensive looking TV show, but guess what? It fell victim to politics, to wokeness. It wasn't the Swamp Thing show, it was the Abby Arcane show. And that is where DC proper is in danger. Comic sales are low, and a small chunk of business as it is. On the publishing side, they rely heavily on reprints and relaunches, and it's the older books from 30 to 40 years ago that are doing better in the marketplace. Readers aren't hungry for the new stuff, a fact that left publisher Dan Didio admitting the company's failure. We do these facsimile editions where we reprint older issues of comics, including all the old ads and stuff. And in some cases, they are selling more than the new comics with these characters. People are more interested in buying the stories from 30 or 40 years ago than the contemporary stories. And that's a failure on us. And that is the truth. And that is something I was experiencing even in 2013. I was getting tired of the postmodern nihilist stories back then. What happened to hopeful storytelling? And it looked like they tried to do that with Rebirth, then they went back, and I have no idea why they did that. We should be focused on moving things forward. Well, you went backwards by making the New 52 2. Always pushing the boundaries and finding new stories to tell. Yeah, you know what would be pushing boundaries with the new creatives? Not attacking fans and telling fun, thrilling stories that have resolution, that have heroes. That's how we'll survive and grow this industry, and that is not happening. One guy less optimistic DC will turn around is Rob Liefeld. A few months ago, he pegged DC as circling the drain and made his thoughts very clear on Twitter, blaming incompetent management. He commented that they will drive off a cliff and quipped Batman is their go-to prescription. I ain't never seen a company in as much disarray as DC Comics, and he used to work for Image Comics. Thank God they have Batman to act as their Tylenol, their aspirin, laughing gas. More Batman will fix it. And that has been the truth for a decade with DC. And I want DC to succeed. I like DC heroes now more than I like Marvel heroes. And like I've said before, they were much kinder to retailers. They actually tried to work with us. And if Marvel had done the same, things might be different. But we also have to put some of the responsibility on the retailers, and I will get to that. DC is trying to generate interest in a line of teen and young adult material published in a way that circumvents comic stores. And this has been tried in the past, and it will fail. You have the Scholastic thing going on, but that's not going to prop up any comic stores. And this is strange because Marvel has always wanted to circumvent comic stores, but DC hasn't. But they are no longer the DC Comics that I remember. They had a booth at Book Expo, the first appearance there in years, to promote it. Though not tied into DC heroes and titles we know, it could serve as a solid revenue stream. And that's all they're looking for now, is revenue streams. And they can't get it from the comic book retailers anymore. Still, DC has to be concerned about AT&T's short-term focus on profitability and a lackluster approach to legacy brands. A sword hangs over them that keeps drawing closer. Now, I reached out to a couple of my retailing friends and I got a couple of interesting responses. And you have to understand that this is their job. This is their life. and they have to be living in a little bit of fear. Now, one of them isn't. His name is Jamie Newbold. He owns Southern California Comics, and that shop will be around forever. That is the prototypical comic shop. That is what you need to do to survive these days. When I started shopping at SoCal Comics, he didn't have new releases. He just sold back issues and toys, and mostly just back issues. And that's what a real comic shop is. That's how they started out, and that's how they will live on. You can't rely on Marvel and DC, and don't be a diamond retail store anymore. That is the only way this will happen. So Jamie's response was, sounds like the same old speculative BS regurgitated. And that is a Jamie response. And that's why I love that man. He is a great comic shop owner, a great guy. He has a book on Amazon. Here it is. Check it out if you can. Now, I did reach out to a few other retailers and nobody got back to me except for one, and he did not want to associate a quote with my channel because I am too, quote, clickbaity, but he did call me friend in the same sentence. Now, I'm trying to remember back when I ever put the title of a video that I didn't talk about, because that is what clickbait is, but he doesn't understand YouTube. And I understand why some of the retailers didn't get back to me, or maybe were a little salty, because they're living in fear. I would be too if my entire livelihood relied on the decisions of Marvel and DC and their parent companies AT&T and Disney. That would give me a lot of sleepless nights, especially in the last few years. It gave me a couple when things were going well. So I am very glad I sold my comic shop in 2013. And you have to think about an industry that has one distributor, Diamond, and it's never had any competition in the last 15 to 20 years, and nobody's even desired to compete with Diamond. That tells you everything you need to know about the comic book industry. Now, I was all for comics being sold in 7-Elevens and Walmarts, anywhere possible. The more comics out there, the better. That creates new fans. And if you create a new fan, then they'll eventually want to come to a comic store, because a 7-Eleven and a Walmart can't give the service that a comic store can. A lot of comic shops were against this. It was very short-sighted, but that is where the responsibility lies with the retailer, because they were just fragmented. They never wanted to get together, even in this one case that could have saved their ass and been a united voice against Diamond, forcing them to innovate, forcing Marvel and DC to innovate when they had some power. They have no power anymore, so they are now at the mercy of Disney and AT&T, and that's got to be a horrible existence. Now, comic shops will survive. There'll always be some, just like there's vinyl record stores here in San Francisco. But there's not going to be 3,000 like there was at one time, and we have lost hundreds in the last few years. But I will associate one quote to a nameless retailer. That's less competition. That tells you everything you need to know. Now, hopefully DC stays open. I'm hoping it does. I'm hoping it succeeds, but that's hoping against hope. That is not reality. We see the writing on the wall. Things have to end sometimes, and it looks like this will fail eventually. And I'm sorry to say that. I really am. But until the next time, when we get more news, please go to your local comic shop, buy some comics, and if you have a subscriber, pick up your books. Don't leave them holding the bag. And if you can't, just call and let them know, because they have a 2-week window to adjust their ordering. So everybody have a great day, and may the free folks sing songs of your greatness.
Nerderotic.com. Please subscribe.